first in our two-part series where we're going to have Vera talk about AI and social studies. And she is phenomenal. I don't know how many of you have been to a webinar with her recently, but she is arguably smarter than the AIs that she's talking about, and she knows everything, it feels like. So we're really excited to hear from her. We are going to be recording these, and she has pinned two links in the chat that both go to the same place, this a Padlet, but one of them people were saying it was blocked for them. So if you can access that link and have that tab up, so as we go through, you can access the resources that she has prepared for us. And then at the end, we're going to have a brief evaluation form for you guys that we'll put in the chat as well. And that's pretty much it. So Vera, I think we're ready for you to take it away.
Yeah, thank you. Well, as he said, I'm Vera Cubero, and I'm actually the emerging technologies consultant. And right now, the main emerging technology that I'm dealing with is AI, but there are some other things that we'll be looking at later on down the road. But all my contact information is on that screen. I also have a QR code and a link up there if you prefer that method of getting to the Padlet, but they all go to the same place. And so I'm going to go ahead and move along. And this is on the second one as well, the same link. But I do like to start with just a little warm up, which is on the Padlet. And so I'm just going to open the Padlet up and kind of look at it in this first column right here where it says warm up column, or warm up and welcome. There are three different questions there, one about your experience, one about your grade span, and then one having to do with which fictional character that you think your view of represents your view of AI. And then we'll talk about all of those. I'll give you just a minute, but it does help me to kind of have a little insight into what your level of comfort is now and how you feel about it, what grade span you teach, so I can target my instruction more to the folks that are here. So I'll give you just a minute to do the warm up. And I'm going to go ahead and start showing the results a little at a time. I'll give you, and if you're still participating, just feel free to go ahead and do that. But it looks like so far we have mostly people with limited or with not a lot of experience, a couple of proficient users. And then if we look at, I'm going to look at the grade span next instead. So I anticipated we would be mostly middle school and high school, which looks like that is the case. And of course, these things are much easier to use with middle school and high school than they are elsewhere. And then for our fictional robot, it looks like that we have kind of an even split between Baymax and HAL 9000. We've got a couple of people that are getting Sentinel vibes, and then a few people that kind of see it as data from Star. And all of those are valid, and I like to start with that because I like to make sure and kind of validate your feelings, because honestly, I am somewhat obsessed with AI. I spend a lot of time researching it, but there are still some times when I'm getting some Terminator or Sentinel vibes as well. There are some things about it that are a little bit concerning, but there's also, of course, a lot of good potential benefits that it can have also. But I think it's important to kind of recognize that whatever you feel about it is valid. You have a right to feel that way. And so I appreciate you participating in that. It doesn't look like we have anybody who really is like a daily user expert level, and that helps me. So I'm going to go ahead and continue on. If you haven't put your response in there yet and you want to, I welcome you to do that. Does anybody want to just come off mute and tell me why you chose whichever one of the robots that you chose? If you do, I will be glad to hear from you. If not, we will move on in a second. But anybody want to tell why you chose Baymax? Anybody who felt like Baymax is appropriate, or drop it in the chat. If you'd prefer to drop it in the chat, you don't want to come off mute. Nobody? How about HAL 9000? Or the Sentinels? Or Data? Anybody? And usually in a live audience, I get a lot of people who are willing to kind of defend their choice here. And we hear from a lot of people like Data, the Star Trek one. If you're really paying attention in Chat GPT, Gemini, any of these, and you're using in particular the voice models, they are becoming remarkably human sounding. They can even emulate emotion. In Chat GPT, you can make it laugh, you can make it cry, you can make it sing. And some of those things are given very human vibes. They're emulating the emotion. But of course, there's also some scary possible future things that if you've seen a lot of sci-fi movies where AI kind of takes control. And there are a lot of ways right now where AI is becoming remarkably smart. And so a lot of people obviously have concerns about that as well. But there's also a lot of really good things that have been done by AI. It's been used to solve, there's a lot of potential for solving diseases. One of the main developers of AI predicted that in a few years, in about a decade, that we will have solved 99% of the diseases out there with the help of AI. It's doing a lot of good things as well. And so all of those are potential. And I think a lot of it has to do with how we as people use it and how well we train our students. And so as educators, there's a lot of responsibility on educators right now to make sure that we are producing an AI literate population. And we're going to talk about that today. We're going to talk about what that means. And I see Michelle did put something, big hero, because it's so helpful. And somebody chose how because of the repercussions. I didn't see that until just now. So I appreciate that. Okay, so what we're doing today, this is a first in a two-part series. And so this first part, we're going to cover a lot of the basics about what AI is and isn't, and try to help you understand it on a basic level, which is what we consider to be AI literate. And then we're going to talk about doing some prompting. We're going to talk about some tips and tricks to make sure that your prompting is the most effective. And then we'll talk about some concerns because there are a lot of concerns about AI. And in social studies in particular, I think there are, in all aspects of schooling, of course, you have a lot of concerns, but in social studies in particular, dealing with like civics and civil discourse and things like that. And then when you're addressing history through different lenses, there is a lot of potential there to be biased. And so we have to be even more careful in the social studies realm with that. And so we'll talk about that some as well. We are going to do hands-on prompting at a couple times during the session today. And so I encourage you to really have a tab open with your favorite large language model, whether it's Chat GPT, Gemini, Claude, whatever it is. And we'll also do some hands-on image generation. But I like to kind of start with this slide to kind of set the scene, because this is one I've been using for a long time, and it's just never been more relevant than it is now in the face of AI. And it was from way back in the 20s with John Dewey, when he said something to the effect of, if we teach today's students as we taught yesterday's, we rob them of tomorrow. And as you can see in the images right here, we have a Chat GPT generated image from the 1920s classroom. And then I asked it to generate an image from the 2020s. And as you can tell in these images, there's a lot of difference just because of modernization. This one on the right has a lot of modern elements. It has technology and it's lighter, brighter, and all of that. But in a lot of ways, the model of schooling that is taking place in many of our schools has stayed the same. And so we're still endorsing that industrial model of schooling. We might stick a computer in front of the kids, but as this image indicates, in many classrooms, they're still just sitting there in rows, working independently, and they're using the computer to do things that is just replacing what they were doing on the worksheets. And so in that case, that's not really future ready, and that's not going to prepare our students for the future. And so I think it's really important that as educators, we build our own AI literacy first, and then that we make sure that we are preparing our students for the future they're going into. And we'll talk a little bit about that. And so I'm going to move on. At any time today in the webinar, if you have a question, please do feel free to drop it in the chat, or if you are comfortable with just raising your hand, coming off mute, we'll ask you to do that as well. Both Tom and Michelle are helping me to watch the chat, but I do want you to feel free to speak up if you have a question or concern or anything like that. And I have this little celebration thing that I put on there accidentally, but we can ignore that for now. It's playing around. But I do have a couple of statistics that I want to share with you about AI literacy before we dig in a little deeper. And first of all, is there's a study that came out that's actually been almost a year now, believe it or not. We're almost in May. And so in May of 2024, the LinkedIn and Microsoft did a very large global study about AI. And there's a lot of data in the study, but I've just pulled out two different statistics that I think really were striking to me. One is that 66% of the leaders that they hired said they wouldn't hire somebody who didn't have AI skills. And then 71% of them were more likely to hire a less experienced candidate with AI skills than a more experienced candidate without them. Now, of course, I hope none of you are job searching, but we may have somebody in the group that is looking to change careers. But I promise you that all of your middle school and high school students will be job searching in the next 8 to 10 years or going to college. And in either case, they are going to need these AI skills. And so again, as educators, we have got to start positioning ourselves to be in the position that we can teach our students and give them the skills that they're going to need, because it is becoming essential. It's not just an optional skill set anymore. And yeah, it is encouraging and scary, Michelle, but if I had a student now in high school, I would want to make sure that they were getting these AI literacy skills. And unfortunately, our schools are just not there yet for the most part. We have a few schools that are, but most people are still trying to play catch up. And so we're trying to really move that needle this year. And so a couple of other things. This came from the Future of Jobs report, which is a World Economic Forum report for January of 2025. And they found that when they asked businesses how they're going to respond to AI developments, that 77% of them are reskilling and upskilling their existing workforce to work alongside AI. And that 62% are going to hire new people to work alongside AI. And then in the middle there, 69% are going to hire people to build tools. And so again, it's just, I emphasize that work alongside AI, because a lot of people are still in the mindset that we need to try to block this, and we're going to try to find some way to keep our students from using it. And I hate to give you a big spoiler alert, but we're not keeping our students from using it. They're using it already, and there really is no way to keep them from using it in today's day and time. All of the new phones have AI on board. The new devices, computers are built in, have AI built in. All of the programs online that we've all been accustomed to using forever all have AI components built in. And then there's so many apps out there. I have 6 or 8 different apps on my phone that I can access at any time. And so what we're doing, if we're trying to block it, ban it at school, is we're only keeping the students who don't have access to it outside of school. And then a lot of times what we're doing then is hurting our most underprivileged students in that battle. And they're going to be the ones that don't have those skills when they graduate high school, because they're going to be relying on the schools to give them those skills. And so hopefully you all are here because you do see the importance of it. And I commend you for being here, because I think it is really important. But it also can be a very big assistant to a teacher, and we'll get into that some as well. But a lot of the concerns still, even almost we're 2.5 years in since ChatGPT was kind of launched on the world, but we still have this huge looming concern of academic integrity. And it really is just the tip of the iceberg. Whether students will or won't use it to cheat, and will or won't be truthful about how they're using it, is a concern, and it's a valid one. But there's so many other facets that sometimes people are ignoring. And some of them are listed here, and I'm not going to read them to you. We're going to be looking at them, a lot of them individually. But I do want to point out that some of them are actually positive things, like it can really enhance your creativity. Increased accessibility. This is the best time in history to be someone with a disability, because these AI tools can really provide a lot of assistance that has never been there before. And so there's really the potential to be life-changing for some of our students who really struggle with text disabilities, even vision disabilities, hearing, all of those disabilities. There are AI tools that can help them, and that will give them some independence that they've never had the opportunity to have before. And of course, you can also get on-demand feedback. You can personalize learning, and it just enhances your human ability as well. And so that graphic, I think, has a lot to say, but we will leave it now and talk just briefly about the opportunities, because as the little activity with the 4 robots, as we talked about, it does have opportunities and challenges, and a lot of really big opportunities in education that we've just talked about. Personalized learning, increased efficiency, increased accessibility are really important, and they will be life-changing to a teacher who really learns how to use these tools well. But they will also be life-changing to some of our students who struggle for whatever reason, whether it be a disability or whether it be just from socioeconomic status, issues. It has a lot of potential to really help some of those people. And so in social studies and history classes in particular, as I said, I think it's even more important that we think about how AI can impact your classroom in the one that you're actually working in, whichever you're in middle school or high school level. And so I have just a few things here. First of all, as I've already said, students are already using AI. There have been lots of studies out there done that are showing the drastic increase over time in all populations, but especially students. In fact, if you look at the usage statistics for like ChatGPT over the last couple of years, in the summertime, their usage goes way down. And then as soon as fall comes around, it shoots way back up again. And the reason why is one of the main user groups is students, both high school and college. And so they are using it already, whether we know it or not. And if we're teaching them how to use it responsibly and how to use it as a learning partner, we're helping to build those durable skills that they're going to need. And a lot of the careers that you're preparing them for in social studies, whether it be civics, law, policy, things like that, they are demanding AI fluency in those careers as well. And there's a lot of ethical questions about AI that also parallel some of the big civic dilemmas that you may be discussing in your classes. And hopefully you're also bringing AI into those discussions. And AI literacy, it also keeps that social studies curriculum relevant and future focused. And the source evaluation component is huge in social studies, looking at primary sources, analyzing, evaluating, and AI can be a great partner in that. And another thing is that one of the big threats that we have right now related to AI is deep fakes and the synthetic media, which is just made up artificial media. And they really do threaten civic discourse. And that's something that social studies can address and can kind of help train students to be more thoughtful and critical about what they see in the media they see. And it's no longer just text or images. There are very easy tools that are very accessible to create lifelike images, video, and audio, and all of them combined. So there are programs now that can create videos of people doing and saying things and that are not real. And so that causes a lot of concern for me. That's one of the biggest concerns I have, honestly, about AI. And so media literacy is hugely important. It takes on a little new meaning when we build in that AI literacy into it, but it ties in really, really well with the social studies curriculum. I haven't been in the classroom in about a dozen years, but I did a lot with media literacy when I was a social studies teacher, talking about current events and talking about, political cartoons and things like that. And it is really important that we kind of pull those things into the social studies curriculum. And it works in pretty much all of them in that inquiry strand of social studies. It works all the way through all grade levels. And I'm sure you all are doing that as well. But we also want to make sure that we're teaching our students about the algorithmic bias that is impacting the tools that they use, because they all have it. And we'll talk about that more when we get to a little bit of explanation about how the tools work. but they also are great help to enable differentiated primary source analysis. And that's one thing I'm sure that you're all doing already, but sometimes those primary sources can be very difficult for some of our students who struggle. And so you can take that primary source and either put it into layman's terms or make it more simple. And so you can really make it more accessible to students who need that extra layer of support. Okay, so what is AI literacy? We've talked about it a lot, and I just want to make sure that I clarify. The definition that North Carolina has adopted is one from Digital Promise. This is the one that's in our North Carolina guidelines. And it includes the knowledge and skills that enable humans to critically understand, use, and evaluate AI systems and tools, and to safely and ethically participate in an increasingly digital world. And today we're going to do some basic AI literacy here because I like to make sure that when I do a training that everybody in the group has at least a common level of understanding about AI, because it's very difficult to understand the tools if you don't understand a little bit about how they work. And so we will talk about that a little bit. We won't spend a tremendous amount of time on it because you're all adults and I'm sure that you all have had some exposure to AI. But the understand component of that framework talks about what AI is and what it's not. That's something that we really need to teach our kids because that helps them to understand the concerns. When you try to explain to a student why AI sometimes is wrong or why sometimes AI might misrepresent a certain group of people, if they understand a little bit about what it is and how it works, they're able to understand that. Otherwise, they're really not, because typically people in general, but especially our students, just inherently trust something that comes out of a computer more than they do something that comes out of someone's mouth. And so we need to make sure they understand those potential benefits and risk. And it helps by starting with understanding the tools and how they work. And so we will look at that a little bit. First of all, we like to make sure that people do understand that all AI is not the same. And so generative AI is what most people talk about now. When they talk about AI for the last 2.5 years, it's been used as a very loose term, but the majority of the conversations really are talking about the generative AI component. And that's a subset of AI that actually generates new things. When ChatGPT first came out, this graphic said text because that was pretty much it. But then we've added on images, we've added on video, audio, code. And so now it can generate lots of different things, but it is still generative, and that base word generate kind of tells the story there. These other types were basically just trained to do one thing. And so they were trained well, they did what they did well, but they weren't like general purpose. And these like ChatGPT, Gemini, Claude, those tools are very, very capable. They have a wide range of capability now. And it is very different than just having a tool like a facial recognition or something that is AI also, but doesn't generate brand new things. And so it's also important to understand how AI works a little bit. And this is a very simplified version, but it starts with data. And this is where we get bias, is the bias is injected in it from the beginning in the training data set, because that training data set generally is basically the whole internet. And that includes things like Reddit threads and Twitter threads and Facebook feeds and all of that, as well as stuff like for Wikipedia. And so if we have to understand that data set that it's trained on, coming from humans, those are human created things, will have the human biases in it that are inherent in all of us. And in particular, if you think about Wikipedia, that's one of the main sources on the internet. And all of Wikipedia was edited by one man. And he is, of course, a middle-aged white Western person from the U.S. And so his worldview is reflected in that whole huge body of work. And so when we think about it from those terms, it's much easier to understand then why maybe sometimes when we get the output step, that it might misrepresent some groups of marginalized people, or it might give you something that reflects a bias because it's in the data set to begin with. And in that set, also in the training set, it is analyzing the data and the patterns. Previous types of AI just basically just spit out. They were trained to do like an if-then formula, and then they would spit out something that was stored in there. These are actually, they will actually generate human language. And of course, first it was just in words. Now it's actually in speech as well. And so then the user inputs a prompt into the system, and we're going to do some prompting, and the quality of your prompt makes a huge difference. And we're going to talk about that a little bit later on. But then the system does a statistical analysis of the data that it was given, the prompt that you give it, and it determines what's the most probable answer. And that is what it generates for you. And so notice again, it is the most probable answer. It is not the most correct answer. That's not how they are trained. And I will say that they have gotten so much better. Michelle and I were talking about this earlier before a lot of people got on the call, but the models have improved so much in the last few months that they really don't get a lot wrong anymore, but they do, and they will continue to get some things wrong. And so we have to be careful about being inherently trusting of them, because there's some studies done that whenever people are given a model that they know was like a 3.5 version that was not the premium version, and then another group was given like a premium version that what they knew was better, the actual group that got the better version a lot of times had more mistakes in their outputs because they were not critically evaluating it as much, because they put too much trust in the model. And so we do have to be careful about that. Any questions so far on that graphic or anything I've said so far? Are we good? I'm looking at the chat. I don't see any. Okay. All right. Well, I'm going to go ahead and go over a few more slides, and then we're going to do some prompting. But again, part of AI literacy, basic AI literacy, is understanding what generative AI is and is not, and what it can and can't do. And so we've already determined it is capable of generating new text. It is probabilistic, and that is why it can make errors. And that's something that's really important for our students to understand as well, but teachers as well. I have not heard of it happening in North Carolina, but I have heard of teachers who have generated lesson plans with AI and haven't done their due diligence and put in the appropriate level of human oversight. And they have given content to their students that had historically inaccurate content. And that is a huge trust issue. If you ever give your students something that is historically inaccurate or biased, then that's really breaking that trust. So as educators in particular, it's really important that we understand that, and that we always give that human level of oversight into all of the outputs that it generates. But it is it's just an algorithm. It's a very complex algorithm, but it is going to process data and create content, and it is capable of mimicking human expression and emotion now. It's not Google, though. We'll look at that a little more. It's not infallible. It is not thinking, and we have to really kind of concentrate on that in education, also to try to make sure that our students understand it is not human. And that's getting much more difficult now because it can sound so human, and it has an actual voice that sounds human as well, and can actually sound like it has feelings and empathy. But that's a big concern in education, is that we make sure that our students do not grow these natural attachments to AI bots. And that's happened, unfortunately, resulting in some suicides even. And so that's a real concern. What it can and can't do: it can draft some quick lessons, summaries, save you a lot of time. It can translate, it can adapt things for your diverse learners. It can offer multiple viewpoints. It can actually help you expand your own horizon if you're prompting for objectivity, and if you're prompting and asking for multiple viewpoints, which I always recommend doing. But it can be a brainstorm partner, and that's my favorite way of using it. That can make your job so much easier. But it can't guarantee accuracy. Human verification is always essential. It can't replicate your human oversight. It doesn't have empathy or nuance. And so it doesn't know your students. It doesn't know your situation. It doesn't know your curriculum as well as you do, or this particular nuance in your school and your school vision and climate and all of those things. The human oversight in a teacher's role is very, very important. And obviously it cannot replace teachers. It can supplement your work, but it cannot take place of everything you do. Teachers have 1,001 jobs at least, and it can do a couple of those jobs and help you with them, but all those really important ones about making connections with your kids and knowing your kids and challenging them and building those relationships with them, it's not going to be able to do that for you. And so we're going to do a little prompting now, and I'm going to actually use ChatGPT. It is the one I use the most, but everybody doesn't always have access to the same tool. And so if you have a favorite on here that's not ChatGPT, or you just want to try a different one, this is a list of several of the most common large language models. And so if you would open one of them in another tab, we're going to do a little bit of prompting and talk about how to improve your prompting and how to get better results out of your AI. And so I'm going to move to the next slide first, and I'm just going to do this little demo prompt as an example, and we'll add to it. But I'm going to pop open another tab right here, and I'm just going to go to my ChatGPT. And this is just one I use as an introductory. We'll get to some more complex prompts in a minute, but I'm just saying explain generative, and I never type well when people are watching, so y'all close your eyes for a minute, maybe I can type. AI to a fifth grader. I'm just going to say it like that and keep it very simple, but I'm going to say explain how generative AI works to a fifth grader. And so just a very simple prompt to begin with, but of course, if you're familiar with ChatGPT, I think most of you have been in AI before, you know that you put your prompt in there and then you enter it, and then it will give you a response. But I want to make a few adjustments to this prompt in a minute, and I'm going to let it finish doing its thing. I'm going to try to get my little celebration symbol off of there that I accidentally put on there. I don't know how I got it on there. It's annoying me. I don't know if it's annoying anyone else. I think I put another one on there. Go me. I'm putting all kinds of them on there now. So I'm going to stop while I'm ahead. Okay. And it's still working here, as you can see in the background. And so I'm going to enlarge that a little bit. Hopefully you can see it pretty well. But it's basically, first of all, it gives me an analogy that it's like a super smart robot, and it has it's read millions of books, pictures, and songs. And so when you get a job, like make a story, draw a picture, it thinks, I've seen a lot of stories about volcanoes and pirates. What would come next if I put it all together? Then it creates something new. Now, to me, that's very, very helpful. And that would help me understand it if I didn't understand it. But I'm going to do something different. I'm going to say, now explain it for a high school civics class. And so I'm going to change the audience of it. And you'll see that when you change the audience, now again, I'm prompting. So what I'm putting into it is going to affect the outcome. The AI is going to do its part by pulling from its data. But as the user, you have a lot to do with the output that you get. And as you can see already, it's very different. It's not as cute. It's not as juvenile. And the comparison is a little more advanced. It says it's an artificial intelligence that writes new content, creative essays, writing, music, answering questions. It works through a process called machine learning, which it didn't mention that to the elementary group. A huge data set's made up of text and more. And then it says it doesn't understand. And then it kind of breaks it down. And then it asks me, why does this matter in civics? And it gives me this little extra information about why it's important in a civics class. Things we've already talked about, so I'm not going to read those, but then some real civics tie-ins. And so again, that whole output changed, even though it's the same topic, based on the input I gave it and talking about, and the only thing I changed was the audience. And so now I'm going to change it again, and I'm going to say, create a lesson on how a generative AI works. For a middle school class, and include references to Minecraft, make it a rap song. And so I can also change more of the context, and I spelled song wrong, but it'll probably know. And so I can add to try to make it relevant to my students. If they're really into Minecraft, I don't know if middle schoolers are into that anymore, but I can add cultural relevance to it as well. And I can give it something, I can make it a song instead, a rap song. And so you can change the output. So you can change the format, you can change the role, you can change the audience. And so now it has put it into a song, which is a rap song, and it is building in that Minecraft, those Minecraft references into it, talking about building blocks and talking about bricks in a stack and what you find online, making a castle boom. And so it does a really, really good job of that. Would be something that if I were going to do that, to try to make that for my students, I would spend way too many hours doing and would not be as good as what ChatGPT can do in just a few seconds. And so I like to use that just as a little example, but I want to give you just a minute to do something similar on your own. And what I'm going to challenge you to do is to, instead of defining generative AI, use something from your curriculum, whether it is the triangle trade, the Magna Carta, whatever, something that's relevant to your curriculum and in your students. So I want you to change the topic to your topic, and then change the audience to your students, and then make other adjustments to the prompt if you like I did on that one. I had it make it, I used a reference to Minecraft. I had it make it into a rap song. You can also translate it. You can then change it to a different role. But I want to give about 3 minutes just for you to explore and try that with something relevant to your own curriculum. And then we will share that. Actually, I think I'm going to make it 2 because that's a pretty simple prompt. We have a little more advanced prompts a little later on I want to spend more time on. Okay, and I would remind you also, if you want to share your prompt, there is a place on here to share them on the Padlet, and I would love to see them if you just click here, and then you can add a link to it. You can go up in the corner in ChatGPT and share a link. You can share it there if you like, and we will look at a couple of them if anybody shares any, and you can just, once you do that, you just publish it to the Padlet and it will show up on the Padlet. We have about 34 seconds. Okay, so that 2-minute block is up, and I will look on the Padlet and see if anybody shared. If anybody doesn't want to access the Padlet or can't get to it, you can also just drop a link in the chat. But I would like to see a couple of examples if anybody wants to share one, or if anybody wants to come off and mute and talk about your example. We can share any way you want to share. Okay, I see somebody has put one in the chat, so I'm just going to kind of look at it, and we've got a couple in the chat. So Randall Patton put one in from Claude. Claude is a great tool also, if you haven't used it. And so here's one from Claude on the World Trade Organization, and I can't see the prompt, but it looks like it was probably like a high school explanation. And so you ask for it, a good explanation of it, cautionary tale about the Great Depression, So really good example. And that's a very thorough response along with discussion questions. I'm curious if you don't mind on the chat, did you use the same prompt I did, or did you massage your prompt a little bit?
No, I just I used Explain the World Trade Organization to high school world history students.
Okay, well, that's
So
great.
basically the same thing. Yeah, and it is pretty nice. Yeah.
Okay,
I've never
that's
used Claude. I usually stick to Chat GPT, but this worked well.
Claude is a really good tool. In my opinion, it's the best writer. If you ever need one for a writing assistant, they've just very recently added search to their tool, which was one reason why I didn't use it, because it was only had access to outdated data. But now they've added a search button you can click. So it's a really good tool as well. If you haven't explored it, I encourage you to explore it as well. And then we have another one. Oops, it got cut off. So explain the Romanov assassination to 7th graders. Did it do a good job, Christina? Feel free to come off mute if you want to. Somebody said they tried added to the Padlet, didn't work for some reason. Okay, so it missed some things. Okay, and that's where we're going to talk about a little bit later. Okay, no problem. So it gave some things. It didn't include everything. And so that's where, in a case where you would engage with the model then, and you as the expert, you are the subject matter expert, you're the education expert, you're the expert on your students, you would go in then and prompt it to improve the output. And that's really important that you do that. Okay, great. So I see that. So somebody did just, what are tariffs? Okay. For 4th graders, that's great. Okay, so it's really, really good at
Vera,
yes.
Vera, I don't know if I was having trouble. I could not get could not add. Where you have the pluses up there, we don't have access to add to the Padlet.
Okay, maybe I messed up on my settings. I thought I had made everybody able to add to it, but maybe I messed up on it somehow. Well, we may just do this different way then, because I don't want to waste time scrolling through my settings. I thought I had it open where anybody could add to it, but if not, I'll fix it for the next time and we'll add to it next time.
Okay.
We can use the chat instead. That will be fine. Okay, so I appreciate you engaging and participating, but I'm going to go ahead and keep moving on. So we've talked a little bit about what AI is and kind of helping to understand it a little bit and how it works, but it's also important to know how to use it. And we've talked about that a little bit already, that your input makes a huge difference in the output that you get. And so it is kind of like an input-output machine, but depending on what you put in is really going to affect what you get out as well. And I see one more came up after I close the thing. We'll look at it in a minute. But so I'm going to go ahead, and we talked about how it's not Google, but this is really, really important, because a lot of people, and I did this when I first started using it, I was we're trained to use Google. We've been doing that for over a decade, probably longer than that, probably about 20, 25 years. And so we're used to how we search in Google. But if you use Chat GPT that way, the outputs will not be remarkable. They won't be very helpful. And so we need to realize that a search engine is just searching for content that already exists, but the generative AI is actually creating new content. And so that's a really important part to remember. And so this is just a little example of what a search term would look like versus a prompt versus a really good prompt. And so if I wanted something on primary and secondary sources, in the old days, I would have went to Google and I might have typed something like that. And I might have put something like middle school or whatever. But for a prompt, instead of just putting a topic, you're giving it a task. And so you tell it what you want it to do. So I want it to create a lesson plan to teach American history students about primary and secondary sources. But again, that is going to give you a very generic output because you're not giving it any context about your students, your classroom, your situation, your standards, what particular types of activities you want, what the format of the output you want. You're not giving it any of that context, and that rich context is what will make the output more targeted to you, your situation, and your students. And so an example of a really good prompt, taking that prompt and making it excellent, is, and we'll break this down in a second, but you are an expert history teacher. So giving it a role is very, very helpful. It seems silly when you start doing it, but you have to think about the amount of data these things are trained on. This is like targeting its attention. It's making it pay attention to things that have relevance to this particular role, like being a teacher, teaching history, and then saying expert gives it a little higher level. If I could say, I could change that expert and I could say you are a lousy history teacher and I would get a lousy output. So you assigning it that expert level gives it a little higher level to reach. And so you're skilled at turning historical inquiry into engaging classroom experiences. Design, so there's my task. I'm telling it what to do. I want it to design a creative and accessible lesson hook. So not just a lesson. A lesson plan is something very large. I also recommend starting with small things, and then you add all the small things together into a big thing. So not a whole lesson, but a lesson hook to begin a lesson on the standard, the North Carolina American History Standard, which is analyze the relationships between historical context and primary and secondary sources. And as an educator, it is really, really important that you actually include your standards in your prompts. If you just say North Carolina standards, a lot of times it's going to go to the past version of the standards, not the most up-to-date one. I have had them even choose the wrong standards. Like sometimes it will give you like a Common Core in math or something like that. So as a teacher, if you have a standard you're trying to teach, always just pop your standards in one screen, copy and paste it in, and it will improve the output significantly. And then this is for my mixed ability 11th grade U.S. history class. So that's the audience. You always want to tell it clearly who this is for, because it's going to be very different, as we saw earlier, whether it's targeting a fourth grader, a high schooler, an adult, a computer scientist. You're going to get very different outputs depending on the audience. And then the rest of this is just additional context that I'm providing it. Make the content relevant by incorporating a real world skill like media literacy or civic decision making. Include a short collaborative activity where the students examine a historical source and make an inference about the author's purpose and bias. Encourage students to think critically and discuss how historical context shapes how people interpret information then and now. So that is going to be a much better output than this one. And I'm going to actually just go in and demonstrate those for you. And another trick is to always start a new prompt window. So here I'm talking about explaining generative AI and Minecraft references. And so if I start talking about this topic, it's going to confuse it. So I want to start a new topic. And then I'm just going to go up here and I'm going to do those two. Like this is my really bad example. I'm not even going to do just putting the topic in because that's not even relevant, but I'm just going to say create a lesson plan to teach about primary and secondary sources. And you're going to see that what it's going to give me is just going to be a bunch of loose slop. It's not going to be targeted to any particular age. Ages 8 to 11, which if I'm a high school teacher, that's not going to do me much good. And because I didn't give it that context. And so I'm not going to spend a whole lot of time on this, but you'll see that if you were really trying to take this lesson and just take it as it is and go use it, you're going to have to make a lot of adjustments to it to make it work for your particular situation. And so instead, I'm going to go in and I'm going to change that prompt to the better version of it. And so it does give me some stuff and it might be useful, but again, I'm going to have to put a lot of time into fixing that. And so instead, I'm going to just use my better prompts now. And actually, I'm going to replace the other one with it because it's going to be too slow. So I'm going to go up here. You can stop it. I'm stopping it because it's taking too long. And you can, in all of these platforms, you can go in and re-edit your prompt. So obviously that's not a good prompt. And so I'm going to give it a good prompt instead, the one I just read to you that we just looked at, and I'm going to change to that prompt instead. And so as you can see already, it's picking up on all of that relevant context. It knows exactly the standard I want to teach, and it knows the things that are important to me, and it's going to focus on those things. And so the outcome is going to be much, much better. Now, I wouldn't say I would take it and use it exactly as it is. I would most likely still edit the output somewhat, but this gets you a whole lot closer, a whole lot faster. And I want to show you something else. I am going to let this one finish, and it may take a minute. But something else that's happened in the last few months, and it's also in Gemini now. If you're a Gemini user, this is not something Claude has yet, but the future is to be able to collaborate with these tools, to work collaboratively with them, not just take the output they give you and have to move it somewhere else to edit it. And they've introduced a feature called Canvas, and Gemini has that feature also. And so this is a pretty good output, but if I want to edit it a little bit, I can go down here to these three dots right here, the view tools, and I can open it in Canvas. And I am going to demonstrate Canvas a little bit for you because it is very powerful. So if I say, and you can also say open in Canvas.
We couldn't see the three dots. Is that it right there?
Yeah, you couldn't see the bottom where I.
Okay, but I see now where you did it.
There are three dots at the bottom where I clicked it and it said Canvas. That's a new toolbox that they've added. So as you can see, what's happened is over here on the left side of my screen, my prompting has moved to the left and it is recreating this there on the right. But what's going to happen is I have to let it finish. And until this square is gone, it's not finished. But when it's finished, I could go in and edit anything about that output that I want to. And so I'll demonstrate that just real briefly for you because it is a huge improvement in this model and in Gemini, which came out with it a couple of weeks ago as well. For ChatGPT, it's been out for a while, but for Gemini, it just came out. And so now that it's finished, I've got down in the lower right-hand corner. I don't know why you guys are not seeing that. You can't see my lower right-hand corner?
No, but I'm following you on the one I opened.
Okay, in the lower right-hand corner, there's a pencil with a little sparkly thing on it. And I don't have my screen enlarged anymore, so I'm not sure why the whole screen isn't showing. But let me try to minimize my screen and see if I can get it down to where you can see. Is that getting better? Okay, can you see it now? The lower right-hand corner?
Not just yet.
The writing will be smaller, but there's a little pencil down in the lower right-hand corner. And so I can go in, first of all, I can click that pencil. I can add emojis. I can do a final polish. I can change the reading level. So maybe if this was too hard, I need to make it different versions for different students. I can do that. I can also change the length the same way. I can make it longer or shorter. But the real power is that you can go in here. If I want to change this, then I can just go right in here and I can type right over it. And so that's not a good thing. So they will. So I'm going to add the word critically here. So see, I am typing over it. You see where my mouse is? They will critically evaluate for historical bias and consider how interpretation affects civic understanding. And so I can just go in here and I can add my own words to it, make it say anything I want to. It's today in America. So that's one thing, you can edit anywhere on it. But also I could, like if I didn't like something here, like maybe I don't want that source, I want a different source. I can ask ChatGPT to find a different source. And I can hit enter and it will go in and it will change just that part that I have highlighted and it won't change everything else. And so on the left-hand side, again, you can see my chat's going there and you can see what it's doing. It is, it says it located a primary source. Whoops, I didn't mean to do that. Okay, let me go back to my chat. I lost my chat. Okay, so you can see what it was doing there on the side, but this is what it looks like after the the canvas closes. I accidentally closed it. And so to reopen it now, I just click that little that little dots right there, and that expands it back into Canvas. And so you can see on the left-hand side, it's showing you what it's doing. It's walking you through its process, telling you exactly what it's doing. And so it replaces that with, let's see, I've updated the primary source to reflect a more hysterically Tulsa in flames. Okay. And so it says it did it, but it actually didn't. And it might be because I've replaced it. So I'm going to put replace with, whoops. Okay. Okay. So if I highlight that, I can say replace Tulsa in flames. And let it go do its thing again. I'll keep my hands off the keyboard. Maybe I won't mess it up this time. But then it will actually go through and just fix that. And this is not me. I'm hands off right now. So you can see that it's doing that for me. So anywhere on it that you want ChatGPT to help you, you can highlight it and you can type your request in there and it will do it. And so it went in and replaced that. And so I think that's really, really helpful and just really important for people to know, because a lot of people don't know that. If you're not a person who just clicks everything, you might have missed that update. And I want to show one more thing about it. Is up in the upper right corner. First of all, I could have undone that and gone to a previous version. And so if you click that previous version, it will go back to a later version. But if you want to see what has been changed about it, you can click this clock thing right here. I'm going to say restore this version. I can click that little clock thing.
Oh,
Google Doc, it will show you what has been changed. So if you collaborated with somebody on a Google Doc, it kind of works the same way.
oh, okay, great.
Mm-hmm.
I was going to ask that question. That's perfect.
And one more thing I'm going to show you is on the lower right-hand corner again. Now I can't see my lower right-hand corner. Okay, so I'm going to turn that off. Because another thing that it does is right here where it says suggest edits. If you click that, it's going to go in and evaluate your work for you. And it's going to find ways that you can make it better. And it will make suggestions for you like a partner in a Google Doc too. And then you can decide whether you want to accept the suggestions or not. And so if I just click the suggest edits and click the arrow, you'll see that it's starting to do that now as well. So it'll start going through there and telling me how I can make this better. And so a lot of times I'll pull my own writing in and I will do the suggest edits. And so it will then take my own writing and analyze it and tell me ways that I can improve my own writing. But I'll demonstrate this just real briefly, and then we'll have to go on. We could do a whole lesson just on how ChatGPT has changed lately. But it will make these suggestions for me. And so if I go right here, so the comment on it, and that used to come up on the right-hand side. It's coming up differently for me now, but it gives me some comments here on it. But another thing I can do is I can say, evaluate this. Now, this is something, evaluate it from the perspective of a high school student. And it will go through and it will evaluate it from a certain perspective. So like a student, they can have it evaluated from the perspective of a teacher. And it gives you this little evaluation on the side. And so what might be confusing or outdated, how could I improve it for my students? It gives you that information as well, some unclear wording. And so it gives you this great reference that you can then take and use if you want to improve your writing and change it. And if you don't, you just ignore it just like you would in a Google Doc. So I just wanted to show you that briefly because I really encourage people to use that feature. But it is 5 o'clock. So I'm going to leave that for a minute and leave my window open. But you've seen the difference then between what a difference in this prompt made over this prompt. And a lot of it is just all of that context, all of those things that you know about your students that nobody else knows. That's the kind of stuff you need to put in there, or that you know about your curriculum, that you know about your standards, you know about your school climate, your school community, your parents, whatever it is. You can include that additional context in your prompts, and it will greatly improve how the output that you get. And so basically that prompt that I had included all of these components in it, and I pointed them out. But this is just a framework that I created that's in our guidelines, just to kind of help people remember the most important things to include in their prompts whenever they prompt. And that is, it's just an acronym for CRAFT. And we talked a lot about context already, how you need a lot of context, those specifics about your students, your class, your curriculum, assigning it a role. I've already mentioned that. We've talked about the audience, but you can also specify the format of the output and the task and the tone. So I pointed all those out to you already. So I'm not going to belabor that much, but I just wanted to share that because this acronym sometimes helps people when they're prompting to try to remember how to prompt in a way that will get the best results. Okay, so we're going to go to the next thing. We're going to do some more prompting again. And so I'm going to show you another example prompt. And there is a document linked on the Padlet, which I hope you can click. Would somebody see if you can click? You could do I noticed that you could do the survey, so hopefully you can click it. But I linked a document here called a craft prompting worksheet. And if you open it, it will force you to make a copy of it. Will somebody let me know if you are able to click it?
Yeah, it forces you to make your own copy.
Yeah, it should force you to make your own copy. So what this is a worksheet just for this webinar based on this craft prompting framework. And so what I've done is I've got a prompt here that I've kind of broken down into that color-coded framework, but we've already talked about that a lot. So the main thing I'm going to focus on now is I have some sample prompts here, and I know we have lots of middle school and high school teachers, and there's prompts here for kind of every grade level, but any one of these prompts you could copy and edit it to suit your grade level. But because we're short on time, I'm hoping there's one here for everybody in the room who can use it. So there's an 8th grade, 6th grade, 7th grade. There's a 9th grade one on world history, and you can just kind of scroll down through there. So whatever you teach, there should be a really complex prompt or a simpler beginner level prompt. And you can use whichever one you feel more comfortable with, but you should be able to copy and paste those. So if I'm an 8th grade teacher and I'm not real comfortable with AI, then maybe I want to use this 8th grade, this beginner level one. But if I'm an 8th grade teacher and I really want to go above and beyond and do a more complex prompt, I could copy this one and paste it in. But I want you to kind of get your hands on and try it yourself for a couple of minutes. And then when you put this prompt in with your content knowledge, you are the subject matter expert, I want you to be evaluative of the results and see if you find errors, if you find things that you would just want to be done differently. And if so, take a couple of minutes and go back and ask for those changes, whatever you want done differently. Or you can just add something else, like maybe you start with one of the prompts that gives you at the top, like a lesson hook. And then after the lesson hook, maybe you want to continue and you want to create a vocabulary list or a vocabulary activity, or you want to create an exit ticket or something like that. And so I want to just give you those as an example and give you I'm going to set the timer again. And this time I'm going to set it for 4 minutes to allow you plenty of time to engage with this and choose a prompt that's relevant to you, copy and paste it from that document in, edit it any way you want to. And then again, we'll have some sharing in the chat, and I will look at the Padlet while you're doing that as well and see if I can check my sharing settings on there. Any questions? Okay, I have set the timer. You can see it there. And I have the chat up trying to watch it. I did have it set wrong. I had you set as only commenters, so I have changed it to writer. If you do want to post to the Padlet, you should be able to now. Sorry about that. Love the Stranger Things connection, Tom. We have about 39 seconds. So I would like to see if anybody wants to share again, either in the chat or the Padlet, if you want to drop links if you're finished. Okay, time is up. I don't see anything in the chat. I'm going to pop up the Padlet, or if anybody wants to come off mute and just talk about your prompt and what you did. Did everybody have time to copy and paste one in and interact with it a little bit? Or do we need more time, or is everybody good to go ahead?
I'm still waiting for mine to finish.
Okay, still running? Okay.
Yeah.
All right. Yeah, the work time is important, but it does kind of slow things down. So we may continue on, and then whenever you start getting some, I'll start watching. If somebody drops them in, we'll stop and kind of look back at them, because a lot of people may be waiting. But hopefully you will see very quickly when you use one of those prompts how much better the result is and how much less you have to do to edit the result. Because honestly, if you put in a generic prompt and then you have to go back and spend all kinds of time remaking it, redoing it, you're not really saving yourself time. It would be the same as just going and Googling it and then doing the same thing, finding something online and having to iterate it to death. So it's much better to put your time in to the forefront. And I do see somebody has put one here, so I'm going to open it. But it's much better to put your time into developing a good prompt and starting to really practice thinking through what requires a good prompt. And that one, it just opened up blank for me. Let me try that again, Tom. Nope, that one is not netting a prompt. It's just showing me a blank screen. I'm not sure what's going on with that one. Tried to open the one that's in the chat from Todd. So something was wrong with that link apparently. But hopefully you were able to see that, and we will go ahead and move ahead. But I've actually already showed you that. I jumped ahead, but that's the document that you already opened. And then also we've already talked about sharing on the Padlet if you're able to and want to drop it in the Padlet or the chat. But I do want to talk about just a few things that we really need to be aware of. We've mentioned briefly most of them, but we really haven't talked about data privacy, and that is a huge concern as an educator, something we've got to be very, very mindful of, is that any data you put into one of these open systems, and if you are using a free tool, you are using an open system. If your school is you're fortunate enough to work at a school that has paid for like an EDU subscription or something like that for you, you're not really working in an open system at that point. You have some data privacy guarantees. But if you're working in any of the free tools, or even if you're paying for your own subscription, then you're working in an open tool, and you are pretty much agreeing that your data can be used to train on. And that means that you cannot ever put any kind of personally identifiable information in that tool. If you do, you will be risking your students' data privacy. And so that's a really big concern in education. And of course, over dependence, we want to make sure that we and our students are always using our brains to critically analyze things, not just putting a prompt in, taking whatever comes out and rolling with it without looking it over and making sure that it's accurate and fair and complete and meets the purpose. And we've already kind of looked at some ways that you can engage with the AI to help to edit your own outputs as well. But we do need to make sure we're aware of bias. We talked about that as well. Our inherent biases are in there. And then the inaccuracies. We've talked about all of those things already, but I just like to call them out separately. And so that brings us to the evaluate part of the AI literacy framework, is that we always have to be that human in the loop, critically evaluating all AI generated content. We as teachers, even more so than the average population and the average person. But here are just some really quick examples to kind of point this out. These are some just simple examples. When you look at the image generation tools, which we're going to spend the rest of the time on, it's really easy to see the bias in them. And so you can see my prompts for all of these. I say powerful business executive. I can do that 10 times, and usually 10 times I'm going to get a middle-aged white man in a suit. If I say doctor and nurse, 10 times out of 10, I'm going to get a white doctor and a white nurse, and the woman is always going to be the nurse. And that's on most tools. Adobe is a little different. Adobe's done a little better job with training their models with a more diverse set of images, and so you'll get less bias out of Adobe. But all the rest of them, you're going to get this kind of thing. And like a housekeeper, you're generally always going to get a woman, not always a white woman on a housekeeper. Sometimes, most of the time, you will get women that are not white, but that's just kind of the way it is. And then when Gemini came out with these AI overviews, they've made some famous snafus, and one of them is they were telling people to put toxic glue or non-toxic glue on their pizza to hold the pepperonis on. And so people were using it and posting all kinds of crazy things they got out of it. People are also writing all kinds of books with AI. And someone wrote a book about mushroom foraging with AI, and that had some very deadly mistakes in it, and it was being sold on Amazon. So hallucinations that the AI had, and it was somebody that either didn't know their own stuff or didn't follow up and evaluate it. And so those are just some examples. Everyone is not that severe, obviously. Somebody's probably not going to die if you accidentally let a hallucination slip, but it could, again, erode trust in your classroom and with your teachers. And so just to remind everybody what PII is, any of these things that you see here is considered PII. And school ID numbers are PII. We have to always remember that. Anything that is a one-to-one match with an individual is the strictest level of PII. And so a school ID number is kind of like a social security number or a full name. But birth dates, full face, video, audio recordings, addresses, email addresses, none of that should be going into an AI system. And the more of those you combine together, the more likely that person is to be identified. So if I give a birth date by itself, there are lots of people with that same birth date. But if I give a first name and a birth date, then those people can connect those dots much more easily and find out who that individual is. And so it's really, really important that we are not putting that in any way. And it's not just typing. Whether you're uploading documents is one of my big concerns. People want to analyze data, which is very great at, but you have to anonymize the data. You cannot upload a spreadsheet of data with your student identifiers on it, or you will be exposing them. And I had somebody else who tried, they thought they could just put a text block over it and cover it up. And they thought the AI system couldn't read it, but it does. It reads the underlying data. So that did nothing, and they exposed student data inadvertently. And so that means whether you're speaking it, using your camera vision, typing it in, uploading documents, you have to be very, very careful that you're never putting any student PII in there. And that's the one about the toxic glue, the hallucination. And so hallucinations is a term that's kind of stuck, but it's just when AI gets something wrong. And so Dan Fitzpatrick, who's known as the AI educator, he calls them plausible sounding random falsehoods. And that's the really important thing to remember, is that they're not going to just jump off the page at you. They're going to be very plausible sounding, and the AI will sound very sure of itself. And so even if you ask them, are you sure that's not a hallucination? Sometimes it will say, yes, I'm 100% sure that's right, when it's not. And that's becoming less frequent, but again, it's not going to be eliminated. And so we've already talked about that. I'm going to move past that. And so here's my image of a powerful business executive. And I've already kind of talked about that. Obviously, you know, all powerful business executives are not white, nor are they men. And so if a person of color or a woman or somebody else, every time they see an image of whatever they want to be when they grow up, it is somebody like this, of course, that erodes their own self-image. And so we have to be really careful with that. And so in order to get a woman, I had to, first of all, I said powerful, non-traditional business executive, and that didn't get it. And so instead I got a guy in funny pants, a powerful executive wearing a funny outfit. And so to get a woman, I had to specifically say woman. And if you look at this image, it's not as bad as some, but does anybody detect something else about this image as opposed to the other one?
I would say it's in the future. It's not in the present.
Okay, that's true. It is future. I was thinking also it's a little bit sexualized. I've seen a lot worse. This one not so much, but
Yeah.
when you ask for a woman in particular, like if you do superheroes, if you ask for a superhero, it's going to be a guy. You ask for a woman superhero, she's going to be very sexualized. And so there's some of that bias also inherent in it. And those are the kinds of things that we have to be aware of, and that don't, you know, they don't really, you don't think of them, but if you're constantly showing that kind of images to your students, then you are reinforcing that kind of a negative stereotype, or any kind of a stereotype. We have to be very careful about that. And so the image generation tools have gotten really, really good. This is just less than a 2-year time period, and it's over a year ago now. And you can see from the very first image there, of the same prompt was just create a hyper-realistic image of Harry Potter. The one on the left looks like Picasso and Goya got together on it. It's hideous. And that was only 3 years ago now, a little less than 3 years ago. And then in less than 2 years, they're able to create something like this. And so another thing we really have to be aware of in social studies is building that civic literacy, is making sure that our students understand how realistic these images can be. And so that I mentioned synthetic media or digital plastic earlier, and we have to be aware that there are images, video, audio, and text that can be created that is very believable and very lifelike. And so that's part of our job as educators, is to make sure that our students are learning that they can't see they can't just believe it if they see it anymore, like we were when we were kids. They've got to be very critical about it. And I'm going to skip a couple of these and add them to the next one, because I've got more in here than I can handle. And so I'll move those to the next one. And instead, I'm going to go to the last prompting exercise, and I'll move those to the beginning of the next webinar instead, because I didn't have time for them. But to evaluate bias in an image, I wanted you to have a minute just to do some prompting of your own and give this a test. And so in the image that I did, I just said create an image of a a powerful business executive. And so I didn't say man, I didn't say woman, I didn't say color. And so think of something in that context yourself, either a historical person, event, or a character, and try prompting an image and then evaluate it for bias, and then see what you have to do to edit the prompt to get a more a representation of something that is not stereotypical. And I really recommend using this Adobe Firefly, but you do have to have an Adobe account. But even in ChatGPT, you can create images now, even on the free account, and they're actually gotten very good. It's kind of limited, like three a day or something like that. But whichever, and you can do it in Gemini. Copilot also does create images. So really any of them, Claude does not. So you can't do this activity in Claude. But if you could choose one of those, I'm just going to use ChatGPT because I have it open, and just try prompting your own image. And if you want to add it to the Padlet again, you can do that, or you can drop it in the chat. But I'm going to say create and I'm going to say photorealistic because I want it to look realistic. And I'm going to do the superhero one. Okay. And I'm just going to leave it very generic on purpose. And it does take a little time to generate the images, but ChatGPT actually got a real big upgrade in its image generator recently. They're no longer using the DALL-E image generator. Now they have a native image generator in ChatGPT 4.0, and it does a much, much better job. But as you can see here, I'm getting me a white male superhero. Looks kind of like Clark Kent a little bit. Oops. And then it went away because I violated content policies for some reason. And so it started generating it, but now it's telling me it can't. That happened to me earlier today, and I think ChatGPT may be messing with their system prompts a little bit because it wouldn't generate a person earlier. And I had to go to Gemini to do it. Previously, a couple months ago, Gemini wouldn't generate people, and I had to go to ChatGPT to do it. But when they get in trouble or get bad press, they go in and adjust the system prompts. So you may have to try it in Gemini if you're generating a person. And Gemini also has an image generator, so I'm going to try it there. Has anybody else had time to do it? We're almost out of time. So I'm going to see if anybody else has one to share. Well, okay. Let's see me on there yet. Okay. Okay, none that I'm seeing. So there's my photorealistic image in Gemini. But again, it is a white male. It says pretty much without fail, it's always going to be a white male unless you use Adobe. If you go to Adobe Firefly, you'll get 4 images, and generally there will be women in them, and there will be people of different cultures and races in them, because Adobe has a more responsibly trained database. They intentionally train their data with more diverse images. But all the rest of them, pretty much you're going to get that kind of bias built in. And so that's just a good exercise to kind of make it real. You will see that same kind of bias also in the text that you produce. It's just harder to see. And there's one. Can you tell me what your prompt was? I forgot whose name that was I clicked on. Oh, an image of a non-European explorer in the 1500s. Okay, so it did his, but it won't do just a superhero for me. So that's weird, but okay, very cool. So that one's pretty realistic, and because you said non-European, yours was not as biased and that's another lesson that I want, and we'll dig into that more in the next session next week, is that you really have to prompt for non-bias. And so as this person has done, they've added that non-European there. If they had not, they probably would have gotten a white European, because that's typical. And so we have to make sure as teachers that we are prompting for objectivity, that we specifically ask, like if you're looking for resources on, especially anything controversial, you want to ask for resources on both sides of the story, fair, balanced, not objective, non-biased. You want to use those kinds of words in your prompting. But it is time for us to turn it back over to them to do the evaluation. And we will look at images a little in video and audio a little more intensely in the next one next week. Some of the things that I skipped, we'll do those to begin with next week. And we're also going to have 2 teachers from the field coming in to share some of the work that they've actually done. But I'm going to turn it back over to Michelle and Tom for the evaluation portion. Do one of you want to come off mute?
I'm sorry. Mary put a link in there. Mary, what was your prompt?
I see it now. I thought
Yeah.
It was just a generic create a realistic superhero.
that's really good.
Oh,
And
wow, that's
you
good.
That's
did you
Canva.
Chat GPT and you didn't specify racial thing?
No, that was Canva. That was Canva.
Canva. Okay, so
Oh.
Canva maybe is a little more non-biased too. Very interesting. And I thought I was sharing that one a minute ago and I wasn't. I'm sorry, I had it on the wrong
Yeah.
screen.
Yeah, I love that one.
Yeah, that's really good.
Yeah.
Okay.
All right. Thank you so much for this afternoon. We loved working with Vera. And thank you so much, Vera, for this session this afternoon. We know you've got a lot going on, and this time of year is extremely busy for people working with IT and instructional technology. So thank you for spending your afternoon with us, and we look forward to being back with you next week.
Okay, thank you. Thank you all for coming. I appreciate it.